close. It's a tough assignment being commissioner of any of the organizations or agencies of New York City. They are huge enterprises unto themselves, and they're all charged with enormous responsibilities. And when it works, well, nothing's better. But when it doesn't, nothing's worse. What's more important than protecting our children? Perhaps nothing. The man in charge of that in New York City is here this morning, ACS Commissioner David Hansell. ACS, of course, stands for Administration for Children's Services. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Bill.
The last time you were here was almost 2 years ago when you first started. So happy anniversary, I guess.
Thank you. Thank you.
Where does this agency stand now? I think when you first came here, it was not too wild a stretch to say we would describe it as the troubled ACS. And we don't do that anymore.
Well, I'm glad to hear that we don't. But when I took over 2 years ago, Bill, you're right. It was a challenging time for ACS. We were on the heels of a couple of very tragic child fatalities that had taken place in the city. And so when I was appointed by the mayor to this job, the first thing I did was to undertake a top-to-bottom review of the agency, because I wanted to make sure that we were doing our core job of keeping children safe as well as we possibly could, and that I could reassure the people of New York City that we were doing that, because there is nothing more important, as you said, than protecting children.
When you did that review, how bad a job was the city doing to protect our children?
Well, actually, I think we were doing a pretty good job, but there was plenty of room for improvement. And so what I've been focused on over the last 2 years is what I think are the most significant reforms that will enable us to carry out that responsibility more successfully. So, for example, one of the things I realized was that our caseworkers handle 60,000 reports of possible child abuse or neglect every single year. We're often overworked.
How many caseworkers are there?
We have, well, we have a large number, about 1,800, but that's today, because we've hired over my 2 years in this role, we've hired another 1,100 caseworkers. So we've increased the numbers.
More than double.
And so our caseloads have come down. So the caseworkers, who we call child protective specialists, can now devote enough attention to each and every case. And then we've made sure that they have the tools that they need to do the job well. We've given them better technology. They now have tablets. They can go in the field with a tablet, download critical information wherever they happen to be. We've improved our transportation. It's critical. They literally have to go into every corner of the 5 boroughs to investigate possible child abuse.
What have you?
They got to get there fast.
How have you improved?
Well, for example, we're now using zip cars. So if a worker needs to get somewhere you can't get to on the subway or by public transportation very easily, they can identify a zip car in the location that's near their office, grab that zip car, and get out to a family's home as quickly as they need to.
So you give these, more than double the number of caseworkers. You bring them some technology so they can look at a smartphone or an iPad.
That's right.
And say, okay, I'm going to look at Joe Smith's file, and they can call it up, where they'd have to go back to the office before to do that.
That's right.
So it's kind of simple, and yet it's bold and big at the same time.
You're right.
And you have zip cars to get around. They don't have to take buses and subways.
That's right. That's right. It's basic, but it's the infrastructure you need to do a very, very challenging job as well as you possibly can.
How many of these small but big things did you change?
Oh, I think there are many more of them. For example, we're expanding our training. Training is critical. You got to have the skills. You got to understand, what do we look for when you're doing investigation? What are the signs of possible abuse or neglect? So for example, we're about to roll out new simulation training centers where staff can not just sit in the classroom and learn how to do it, they can actually experience what it's like to do it, to sit in a courtroom, to go before a family court judge, to interview a family in their home. They can now simulate what that's like, and so they'll be better prepared to do it when they actually have to go out in the real world and carry out that responsibility.
And some of the things I was looking at, doing some research into what you're doing, and they are small but so kind of important, and I don't mean to say this with any disrespect, but just as a layperson, you look at it and say, well, that's sort of obvious to do. And did it seem obvious to you when you started?
Well, it did, and you know, in my first few months in the job, I spent a lot of time out in the field talking to our staff and saying, what is it? What do you need to do the job as well as you want to do it? And these are the things they told me, and they may seem simple, but they make so much difference in our ability to make sure the kids all over New York City are safe.
So much of what you have to do, so much of what the caseworkers have to do, the Child Protective Service workers, involves so many fundamental issues that you have no control over. Parents getting jobs, parents not having drug problems, kids getting jobs, kids not having drug problems, gangs, drugs for kids, everything. and you're trying to deal with that. Some of those issues you don't have control over.
That's right. That's right. The families that we work with are experiencing all sorts of challenges: homelessness, unemployment, poverty, substance abuse, health issues, mental health issues. We can't always control those things, but what we can do is help parents deal with them. And so increasingly, what we're trying to do when we encounter a child welfare issue, a concern in a family, is to say, you know what, could we address that concern by making sure that the parents have the services that they need to address whatever challenges they're experiencing, keep that family together, and support the parents so they can do a better job of parenting. And increasingly, we're able to do that and keep families together and keep kids safe.
One of the things I liked, I got a lot of little details about what you've been doing, and one of the things that really struck me was that you have tattoo removal, right? You allow kids to get tattoo removal. So if they do go into a gang and they've got a tat that sort of identifies with a gang, or for any reason, you can have them remove it, and they don't have to be stigmatized forever. You're giving them the resource to get that thing removed.
That's right. This is a more serious problem than many of us probably realize. It's not only gangs, it's also sexual trafficking and exploitation. There are more kids than you would think right here in New York City who are either victimized or at risk of victimization through sexual exploitation, sexual trafficking, actually being trafficked for sexual purposes. And when they leave that life, or when they leave a gang, they don't want to carry with them the stigma of having been victimized in that way. So just a simple thing, again, like removing a tattoo can free a child to move on to the next phase of their life. And so our tattoo eradication program we just started a few months ago was a response to something that we were seeing, and we realized, you know what, this could really help young people move on with their lives.
So your name, Administration for Children's Services, really is sort of living up to its billing now at this point. It is services for children.
That's our aspiration, to be services to children and services to families.
You're a smart guy. You helped fight the AIDS epidemic here in New York. You're renowned for that. You went in the private sector. You came back to public service. But you're not the genius of the entire world. You're not Albert Einstein, right? You're
certainly not. Certainly not.
Why wasn't this done before?
Well, some of these things were done before, but I think, the volume of the work is so overwhelming that sometimes it's hard, frankly, to sort of lift your head above, the last case you had to deal with or the next case that's right in front of you and think more systematically about what do we need to do to make this whole organization work better. And fortunately, I did come to this job with a strong background in having managed large organizations. And so I think I was able to look at it and say, you know what, here's some things we could do that will help us across the board to make this a stronger place and enable our staff who are doing heroic work every single day to do that work better.
So you managed to do this without coming in and trashing the workers, which is what happened a lot in the public. They said, oh, these workers aren't doing a good job, but it wasn't that. They didn't have the framework, really, to do their job properly.
That's right. They didn't have the support, and they didn't get appreciation for the quality of the work that they were doing, and we really tried to turn that around.
It's a fascinating subject. I appreciate you coming in. I have one more issue to talk to you about.
Sure.
The Raise the Age program that's been 4 months old now. These are to get kids out of Rikers. Rikers is supposed to close, of course, any time, but we don't know when it's going to happen. Get the young kids out of Rikers, because that's just not a good place for them.
Yeah. Getting the kids out of Rikers is actually step one. Bigger picture, what we're doing is we're basically building on the success that we've had in our juvenile justice program in New York City, and it's been very successful. We have fewer kids being arrested today. We have fewer kids going into juvenile justice today. We're saying, that's worked so well, let's bring older kids into that program. So starting 4 months ago, 16-year-olds who are arrested in New York City today, instead of going to Rikers, instead of going into the adult criminal system, they come into our juvenile justice system, and they get the same kinds of services to get their lives back on track. And we're very confident that we'll be as successful with them, and actually now beginning later this year, 17-year-olds, as we've been with younger kids.
And perhaps one reason why the crime rate continues to drop in New York City. David Hansell, thank you for coming with a 2-year checkup. Clearly you're making a difference at this agency, and we really appreciate it.
Well, Bill, thank you so much for having me.
All right, well, come on, in 2 more years we'll do it.
I look forward to it.
All right, thank you, David. Coming up, we're going to switch topics. U.S. Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey now running for president while President Trump gets ready